What's up, Minecrafters? KC here, and this is episode 7 of my modWorld series. It's nighttime here in modWorld, and I'm just looking around to see if there are any mobs that would be too close for comfort, so to speak. And I don't see any at this point, although they seem to be moving in a little bit. If I get too uncomfortable, I can switch it back to daytime very easily. What I'm going to be working on today is a method to shoot TNT up in the air, maybe similar to fireworks, but not exactly fireworks. But there's a couple things that I want to learn in this episode. One would be how to create primed TNT that's ready to explode. And then two, how to shoot that up into the air. So I'm going to switch over to my code editor window and get started on that. So I'm in my code editor, and what I thought I might do would be to use my magic wand to tap on a TNT block that would prime that TNT block and then again launch it up into the air where it would explode up above the ground. So where I would get started with that is in the use item method, and I have quite a few activities happening here in use item, but where I'm going to put this would be right after the methods that I created in a previous episode that allows me to use my wand to do create, read, update, and deletes on blocks. So I'm going to start here by checking to see if the block ID that I tapped with my magic wand is block ID 46, which is TNT. And if that's the case, then I'm going to create a function called do launch TNT. And I'm going to pass into that the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the block that I tapped with my magic wand. And again, it has to be a TNT block. So if that's the case, then again, I'm going to call prevent default, and then I'm going to return. So next I will begin to define my do launch TNT method. So I'm going to create a new function, do launch TNT. And again, that's going to accept the X, Y, and Z coordinates that I tapped with the magic wand. And in this, the first thing that I want to do, again, because what I want to do is to effectively create a primed TNT block, which again is a TNT block that is in the process of beginning to explode. But I would want to replace the TNT block that I tapped with my magic wand with that primed item. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the level.set tile method on the X, Y, and Z coordinates. And I'm going to set that to 0, which is effectively an empty block, an air block. So that would have removed the TNT block that I tapped with my magic wand. Then the next thing that I will want to do will be to create that prime TNT block and then set it so that it would shoot up in the air. So I think I'm going to split that portion of it out into a separate function that I can call from do launch TNT. And so I'm going to call this function do launch entity. And the reason for that is I can think of a few different uses for this. Just launching TNT would be one example, but in some future episodes I'm going to explore launching other types of entities in the air. So the do launch entity method is going to accept a few parameters. One is the location where the entity will be launched from. So that would be the X, Y, and Z coordinates. And then I think next would be the block ID. Let's call it the entity ID, which is the entity that I'm launching. And then finally, I want to be able to tell this the velocity with which this item should be launched. And again, that velocities can be defined for the 3 different x, y, and z coordinates. So I'm just going to call these velocity x, velocity y, and velocity z. So all of those values will need to be passed in to this doLaunchEntity method. So inside of my doLaunchEnt, or doLaunchTNT, I will call doLaunchEntity, and I'm going to pass in the x, y, and z coordinates that I have been given. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pass in the entity ID for primed TNT, which, looking online, I know that value is 65. And then I'm going to pass in the x, y, and z velocities. So x would be 0 because I want this item to go straight up in the air. The y velocity would be that vertical velocity. So I'm going to set that to 2.75. And then the z velocity I am going to set to 0. So having x and z means that the item is not going to go, let's say, maybe side to side, north, south, east, or west. But the 2.75 in the velocity y parameter will be the velocity with which it will launch into the air. So I think that's all of the code that I need there. So I need to then complete the doLaunchEntity function. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create that new entity that's being specified. So I'm going to create a variable for that, and I'm going to call that EID, and then I'm going to use the level.spawnMob function of modPE to actually create this prime TNT block. So it seems a little bit odd maybe to call that spawnMob function, but that is the correct function to use to create that primed TNT block. So what I want to do here is I want to create that at the x, y, and z coordinates, but I'm going to add just a little bit of space to that. So I'm going to do x plus 0.5, which is basically like a half block. And then I'm going to do the y coordinate, and on this I'm going to do plus 1, so just a little bit, 1 full block high. And then finally I'm going to do z plus 0.5. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to pass into that function the entity ID, which is going to be passed in again, which is value 65, which is primed TNT. And so that would be entity ID. So that should create the primed TNT block at the locations that I've specified. And then the next thing that I will want to do will be to set the velocity of that entity for the primed TNT block that's been created. So to do that, I'm going to call a function called set velocity x, and what I'm going to pass into that is EID, and set velocity x again is a function supported by modPE, so it's not a function that I have created, but then I'm going to give that the velocity x value that I specified when I called this doLaunchEntity method. Then I'm going to do the same thing for set velocity y, again passing in the entity ID, or the ID of the entity that I created, the prime TNT, and then that's going to accept the velocity y value. And then finally I will do set velocity z, again with the entity ID and velocity z. So this function again is creating the primed TNT at the coordinates that I specify, and then I'm setting the velocity of that primed TNT entity. So doLaunchTNT will clear the TNT block that I tap, and then call doLaunchEntity, passing in the coordinates the entity that I want to create and the velocity of that entity. So just looking at this again, looking for syntax errors, logic errors, I don't see any at this point. I have hooked that up when I tap the block ID 46 with my magic staff. It will call do launch TNT with those coordinates, and that then will perform those actions that I have specified. So that seems correct to me. So I'm going to save that, and then I'm going to switch over to Block Launcher, load that script, and then enter Minecraft. So the script loaded successfully, so there were no syntax errors with the script. Again, just checking out the mobs, making sure they're not moving in on me. I think I'm safe for now. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the gimme command that I created, and I'm going to get a few of those TNT blocks. So I'm going to get 64 of those of block ID 46, which is TNT. So I have those in my inventory now, and I'm just going to place a few of those on the ground, step back just a little bit so that we can look up in the sky and see if these things launch properly. But the expectation is when I tap those with my magic wand that they will launch up into the air. So I'm going to tap the first block. And that seems to have worked correctly. So I hope, okay, good. I was going to say I hope that I gave it enough velocity that it wouldn't fall back to the ground and explode. And that seemed to be the case. So I'll just try a couple others here. That seemed to be fine. So that all seems to be working as I expected. So it's nothing too difficult to do, and maybe not real exciting, but part of what I wanted to do there was to, again, sort of create those methods that I may reuse again in the future, because I wrote those fairly generically, where I can ask my script to spawn an entity and then launch it in some direction. Again, with this example, I was only specifying let's say the vertical or the y-axis velocity. But in other cases, I may want to spawn other types of items and shoot those in different directions. So again, that method is fairly generic, and it gives me the ability to specify those. So again, maybe this isn't too exciting, but there's more that I could do with that if I wanted to. For example, maybe when that TNT explodes, I might have it drop some items or something like that. But again, really, I was just interested in making sure that I could create these items and then launch them into a specified direction. So I think I will end the episode here. That was successful. But again, I have a couple of other ideas for this that I want to explore in the next episode. So I look forward to that, and thank you for watching.